everyone. Hi to anyone who is also going to be joining us later on when they watch this recording. Today, we've got the fantastic Mandy Ellis here with us. She is a freelance content strategist and a fantastic content writer, as well as being a marvelous revelatory coach is what somebody has said about you. So I'm going to pass this baton on to you. Feel free to share a screen, make it interactive. The stage is yours.
Awesome. Well, I'm really excited to be here, and big thanks to Andrea for recommending me. She is the sweetest. She is so hardworking, and I was excited to have her as my student. So I'm really glad that we get to do this class. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to do the class. So let's see if I want to do this. Can you guys see my screen? Cool. Okay. So I'm just going to put my presenter mode on. It should just do it. Okay. It's thinking. All right. Can you guys see the slides? Okay, cool. Great. So we're just going to hop on. So I'm Mandy Ellis, and we're going to talk about how to price your freelance projects. Here we go. How to price your freelance projects, writing projects to earn more. So basically, I'm going to give you some smart methods for giving out some high quality quotes, basically your proposals, setting everything up, how to increase your recurring income, how to get some retainers, how to kind of like see further ahead in the pipeline of your clients, and then how to align with kind of top tier clients. Those are all really important things. So, oops, there it goes. So in this workshop, we are going to talk about some of my six-figure secrets, how I kind of put all these little basically like Lego blocks in place to build my own six-figure freelance writing business, so that you can stop struggling for all of your clients, and you don't have to do that like emotional roller coaster of the feast and famine cycle, and you can earn more in less time. We're going to talk about how to like actually understand getting all of your proposals together, understand pricing, how to kind of think about teamwork, atmosphere, and collaboration with your top tier clients, and actually thinking about the long-term value of your content. So one of the things I always ask when I run a class or when I run a workshop or whatever is if you would turn off all distractions. This is going to be interactive and fun. I have some things in here. And then you're going to learn a lot in this workshop, and we'll have live Q&A at the end. So if you ever have any questions or anything, just pop them in the chat or write them down so that we can answer them at the end. But yeah, we have questions, and if this always happens, like someone's nervous, don't be nervous to ask a question. I've heard it all, seen it all. That somebody out there has your question, so feel free to ask it. All right. The first thing I always do when we're talking about pricing is the 5-minute money makeover. So this is how you're going to raise your income right now. So basically, this is what we're doing is we're pumping up our project minimum. So one of the best ways that I ended up hitting six figures was that over time, I ended up adding to my project minimum, and I added to the minimum amounts that I take per type of writing. So basically what you're doing here is like, I know this can be pretty nerve-wracking for some writers, but you have to end up getting out of your comfort zone, and you have to end up raising those minimums and floor prices. So for me, it started small. It was like $100 here or there. So I would move from like, okay, I'm going to take $200 for a blog post to $300. Then I would move to like, okay, maybe $350. Like I'm kind of nervous about $400. But you have to kind of, deal with that fear and anxiety and scarcity mindset as you kind of move along. So maybe you're someone who is like, okay, my minimum for a blog post is X. I'm encouraging you today to just raise it, whether that's $25 or $50 or $100, or you double it. That's really important to building your confidence. The other thing that you want to think about is your total project. So for me, it started out with $500, as you see here. So for me, I was like, all right, the minimum amount of work I will take from a client is $500. And this was after I figured out, after I figured out having project minimums. So $500 is kind of like your minimum. So let's say someone comes to you and they're like, all right, we're going to do 4 blog posts a month, and you're like, okay, my minimum project is $500, like, is this gonna make sense? Like if we do 4 blog posts a month at $200 a blog post, that makes sense. If someone comes to you and they're like, we just need 1 blog post, or we're just doing a trial, You kind of have to figure out how that's going to work, but you kind of want to make sure that you're giving yourself all of that schedule space to say yes to good stuff. You don't want to keep doing this. This is what I kind of did when I burned out, was I ended up taking all of these gigs where it was like $200 and $400 and $500 and $300. It was all this little tiny stuff. And I didn't pay attention to project minimums or floor prices or like certain minimums for things. I just took whatever, and you end up burning out because you're just churning. You have to start setting limits. And then when you set those limits, now you have room to say yes to bigger projects. You actually have space instead of just running the hamster wheel all the time. So as you're kind of going along, if you're like your minimum is, $2,000, try $3,000. And the way I kind of think about pricing is, and we'll talk about this a little later, but the way that I think about pricing is always that you are picking a number that is like making you feel a little nervous. Like it's a little bit above where you feel totally comfortable. And it's kind of pushing your limit a little bit, because a lot of times freelance writers undercharge for their work. So what ends up happening is you pick a number where you feel comfortable, and that's way below like market rates. That's way below where you should be. So pick a number where you feel like a little bit nervous. It's like a little bit above where you would normally go. And I think that's good for project minimums and for types of writing that you do. But what you want to do is make sure you move that up over time, and you keep kind of pushing your envelope a little bit. So here we go. Make sure as you end up raising your project minimums, and you make sure you do that today, like look at your rates today, your floor prices, like the minimum that you will take for a project and the minimum you will take like per blog post or case study or white paper, whatever. Make sure you raise those today and then celebrate it. This is a really big deal. So as we kind of go along, we're doing a lot of stuff in our freelance writing careers. So we want to make sure that we celebrate those things, because if you don't, what ends up happening is you're like, I still don't feel good, even though I hit all my marks. You have to make sure to celebrate these things. So one of the things that I always ask when I do class is, what reason are you here today? Is it reason number one? Are you here because you are a full-time freelance writer, but you're really not seeing the type of income or clients or projects or traction that you want to see at this point? Are you number two, that you've squirreled away some wins and that you are, kind of hitting or missing basically in your career, and you're really struggling to attract those kind of 4 and 5 figure projects from your clients? Or are you number three, where you're kind of side hustling as a freelance writer and you really want to just get out of your cubicle? You're kind of done with the 9 to 5. And you want to make sure that you're going to be well compensated making the switch, but you want to make sure that as you kind of switch from full-time person to freelance writer, that you're able to price right and make the right money. Or are you number 4? Are you maybe a new freelance writer who wants to get your business started, but you're not really sure? Like you want to make sure you avoid all the costly mistakes. You want to make sure that you get away from the troublesome client issues. So I always ask about this in the chat. So if you want to pop it in the chat, which one you are, that would be sweet. I don't know if I can see the chat on this view. Oh yeah, I can. So I don't know how everyone, if you want to pop it in the chat, feel free. But these are also things that I want you to think about. So for me, these are all different stages that I've been in my career, like all of them. So wherever you are, whatever reason that you hung out or showed up, I just want you to know that they're all kind of normal reasons. They're all things that I have been in my career. There's nothing wrong with them. It's just a stage you're at. So no matter what reason or what stage that you're at in your career, I'm cheering you on. I'm here to give you some motivation and help you out. All right. So if you don't know me, I'm going to give you a little bit of info. So I'm Mandy Ellis. I'm all the way, well, on my thing, it's all the way on the left. But these are my 2 dogs. They hang out on my live stream. The middle one is Charlotte. She is half pit bull, half Frenchie. She is all sass. And the one all the way on the right is Bo. And he is going to be 16. He's giant. He's like 65 pounds. And he's still trucking along. So if you know anything about me, you love my dogs. And there's some interesting things we do on the live stream with them. But here's some info I really want you to know. So I've been a freelance writer for the last 10 years, and I'm an award-winning writer. And I also use my 6-figure business to support those 2 puppers that you just saw, plus the 2 humans in my family. I am the breadwinner of my family. And for the last like basically 7 years, I've been coaching and mentoring, answering like hundreds of questions from writers. And I'm always bugging my friends about how they're running their business better, or how they're making more money, or like how they're kind of putting all the bricks in place. So one of the things to remember here is that when you're transforming your freelance writing business, pricing is about understanding really the long-term value of your content. So you need to understand that your pricing is not just about this one project or this one thing you're working on. Your content lives on. So you need to make sure that you remember that piece, and that you need to find the right clients for your business. It's not just like everybody, it's like the right clients for your business. There's really no magic wand. I can't like wave it and just like give you a pile of money, which I wish I could, but you know, but as you kind of move along and you end up having rates, you end up enforcing them, you end up understanding like when you should negotiate or how you should figure these things out, or like really the long-term value of your content, it gets easier and you become a lot stronger in your pricing. And like, you know, picking different numbers or raising your rates over time becomes a lot more natural and something that isn't so stressful. All right, so here's where we're going today. So we're going to talk about pricing do's and don'ts. We're going to talk about reliable ways to build top recurring income. We're going to talk about when, how, and who to negotiate with if you're really getting a lower price. And then we're going to get rid of feast and famine, no more grinding for every cent. And we're going to talk about alignment with high quality, high paying clients. And then we're going to have live Q&A. So the first thing is the pricing do's and don'ts. So here are the do's. So the do's are that you do want to set your rates. Like you want to decide what you're going to get, what services that you're going to offer, and what you would like kind of ballpark ranges for each one. So there's different ways that we do this, right? We want to make sure that like a blog post of 500 to 700 words is different than a blog post that's 800 to 1,000, or a 2,000 word blog post, or a 3 to 5 page case study versus a 10-page white paper. But you want to bounce them off experienced freelance writers or use a guide. So this is one of the reasons why I give out my free pricing guide. It's just because I feel like a lot of writers aren't sure about rates, and I am asking people, polling people all the time. And that's really me bouncing it off other people who have been around for a long time. But that's how you kind of know. Like there's a lot of times where you talk to experienced freelance writers and they just tell you, they're like, that's way too low. Like you shouldn't do that. Pick this other number. And I think that kind of makes you feel like, oh, okay, like, you know, this person who's been around the block, like is kind of giving me a thumbs up. So do set your rates, but also talk to other writers, see what they're saying, and make sure that you're kind of either you have guidelines or you have some kind of community or some place to bounce those rates off of. The other thing is that you want to make sure you have boundaries around those project minimums that we talked about, and then your floor prices, right? So we want to make sure that we have boundaries like that, you know, you're not going to go below X amount per project, and you're not going to go below a certain floor price for a certain type of writing. Those are really important because a lot of red light clients will push your buttons and will try to negotiate you way down below those minimums. And you want to make sure that you have boundaries around that. And you're just like, nope, this is when I walk away. The other thing is that you do want to increase your rates with each new client that comes along. So here's what we're going to do. Like, this is something that I think is really important. Hold on one second. Nope, go back. So as we kind of go along, I did this for a long time. As I got more clients, I would just increase it a little bit, like $50 or $100, or like maybe $500 if it was a bigger project. You can do that with each new client. There's a point that you get to where you're like, okay, cool. Like now I'm at the rates that feel really pro and that I'm really, you know, on point. But when you start out, a lot of times you end up being way too low. So as you increase your rates with each client, you're actually just getting back to market rates. So don't feel stressed out about that. And the other thing is that you want to make sure you're checking in biannually or annually. If you're kind of nervous about doing rate raises twice a year or with every client, then do it every year. I do rate raises every single year, and it helps you make more money. But also you need to remember, if you're only doing a rate raise every year, all of that experience that you gained for the last 12 months, that's worth a lot more money, like a lot more money. And it's not just a lot more money, it's a lot more value to your clients. Like you have more experience, you have more ideas, you have more strategies and tools to solve their problems. So for me, I always kind of think of it as like, if I do increase rates with each one of my clients based on what I'm working on, I did this a lot, right, when I was starting out. That is you just gaining experience with each project. So like what ends up happening a lot of times is we get a lot of blog post projects, right? So if you start at $200 a blog post, then $225, then $250, then $275, then $300, you've already done a bunch of projects by the time you get to $300. And I just feel like that's a really important piece to remember, is like, you're gaining experience, you're getting better at writing. You're doing a lot of things that are really just important to your client succeeding. And you need to remember that it's not just this transactional turning in the content and moving on with your life. You're getting a lot of it, like important stuff out of that. And then you want to understand the content's long-term value. So let me give you, this is like, if you walk away with nothing else today, this is it. This has to do with pricing. This has to do with everything you do. If you write a blog post and then you just leave, you just never see that client, that blog post will most likely just continue to live on their website, driving traffic and leads and sales, and all these important things. If you write a case study, so for example, I have case studies that I wrote like 5 years ago that are still driving traffic and leads and important sales and stuff for my clients. They only paid me one time for that, right? Like they give you $3,000 for this case study and you're like, okay, but they're getting so much more money. They have definitely made way more money in the last 5 years than paying me $3,000 for a case study. When you think about blog posts, or when you think about writing LinkedIn thought leadership or LinkedIn Pulse, or a white paper, or helping them with content strategy, anything that you give them usually lives way longer than your relationship with them. So there's content that I wrote in the beginning of my career, like almost 10 years ago, that still drives traffic and all that important stuff, sales, and helps with SEO, and just does a lot of really great stuff for your clients. You have to get away from this transaction of like, oh my God, I'm so nervous about pricing for $400 for a blog post instead of $500. Like, you have to stop quibbling over $25, $100 in these small situations, because all of the value that you give and that content that they have, it doesn't like get taken down. Like, very rarely does someone go in and just start removing all their content that's driving traffic and leads and sales. Like, it's very rare. So you need to understand this like ripple effect of your content. This is something that is just, I didn't grasp this for years and years and years. Like, I only started grasping it like a few years ago. And once you start realizing that your content is this ripple effect, that does a lot of great good for your clients, you won't start like worrying about charging this or that. It's not the transaction. Okay. It's not this one time, pay me $1,000, $10,000, $30,000 for content strategy, whatever. It's not that. People use content strategy. I will tell you, people will use content strategy that you built like 5 years ago. Like, they'll keep doing it. They won't refresh it, even though they're supposed to. So if they paid you $30,000 for content strategy and now it lasted 5 years, like, they're getting a lot of value for your money. So, or their money. So you need to remember that your content has a ripple effect out. It's not this one time they pay you $800 for the blog post. That's not how it works. When you understand how long the content lives, what it actually does, how it helps your clients, how it helps their audience, how it helps like actually make conversions, that changes the game with pricing. Like, you just stop worrying about all these little pebbles and you start worrying about like the boulders. Okay. So when you're thinking about this, this is the most important thing. Your content lives way longer than your relationship with your client. So feel confident that whatever, you're pricing for your work, and we're not talking crazy, like, don't go nuts. Like, I've known some people who went nuts, but the deal is that most of the time, the value and the fairness and the number that you're picking, that is totally legit for the content. Like, you're not charging $10,000 for like 1,000-word blog post. Don't go nuts. But what you're doing is you're understanding that these things all kind of hit all these different buttons, okay? And that it's not this one-time thing. So don't forget that. That is the most important thing. It lives on, it drives lead, it gives them like 10 times, 20 times, way more money than they ever spend with you. That's really important. All right, let's talk about don'ts. So you don't want to get rolled into this rigmarole with your red light clients. So a lot of times what ends up happening is red light clients will like try to get you below your minimums, and you just don't play that game. Like your rates are your rates, right? This was something that I didn't really get it. I was just like, what do you mean your rates are your rates? Like you pick a number that you feel, like I said, you pick a number where it's like a little bit nervous, right? And almost every writer I know undercharges. So if you're feeling a little bit nervous, that number is probably below what you should get paid. So your rates are your rates. You pick the numbers that you picked for a reason, the amount of value that you offer your clients, the ripple effect of your content, how you actually like the quality of your work, all that stuff. I just feel like sometimes when you get into a pricing game, that's way different than negotiating. Like the pricing game is like someone who says, well, if you spend an hour less time on this blog post, will it cost $100 less? It's like, no, dude, no, you're missing the point. It's not about time. It's about value. Next thing is don't negotiate on the phone. Myself, my friends, almost every writer I know has lost thousands of dollars. I know personally that I've lost tens of thousands of dollars by negotiating on the phone. I know that. I know my friends have. Stop doing that. And red light clients love to negotiate on the phone because they want to put you on the spot and they want you to just pick a number. They're like, pick a number, just like, you know, and then they're like, okay, how do we get that number lower? Just don't do that. You're a human being hearing about their project for the first time. You're not a robot spitting out like a lottery ticket. That's not how this works. What you are is thinking about their project. You want to be diligent and thoughtful. So all you have to do is say like, hey, you know, I totally get that you want a number, but I need time to think about this project. I need to think about the deliverables. I need to think about, you know, the word count. I'm hearing about it for the first time. I just need some time to think. And if you have a good client on your hands, they're like, oh yeah, totally, like totally fine. I think that a lot of times people get nervous that if they don't give a number, they're going to lose a client. Like if you have to get a number to win a client on the phone, then you're in the wrong ballpark. So stop negotiating on the phone. Don't lose $10,000, like tens of thousands of dollars. Like I have. Just tell them that you need to think about it. That's fine. Even if you need to think about it for 5 minutes after the call and send them an email, that's totally fine. But a lot of times negotiating on the phone just makes people nervous and it ends up being this big disaster. So the other thing about negotiating on the phone is that it often leads you to this scarcity and fear mindset. Is like, oh my gosh, if I don't do X, this client won't like me. This client will just like, I won't have this work. It doesn't work like that. Good clients know that it should be a partnership and that they're thinking about a bunch of different things, and you have other projects to work on. So don't get stuck in this fear and scarcity mindset, even now. So let's talk about that a little bit. Right now, there's tons of work. I have other friends who are snowed under with work. When people talk about recessions or trying economic times, freelance writers, like as long as we have survived as a species, right? Like as long as we've lived, we have gone through everything, every single event, right? Like reporters, and even before there was like a thing called a freelance writer, they've survived every hard economic time, all the time. Now you may have to get scrappy. You may have to like take some gigs that you just, you know, that sometimes you just need the money. You may have to do some stuff that like is really hard, like a ton of marketing, or you may have to add different niches or do different stuff. You may have to be scrappy, but you can get through it. Like, you know, like I'm a millennial. I've been like, when I getting my, basically between getting my first job and now we've had like economic crashes and we've had the pandemic and all this stuff, right? And there's all these things that really have to do with mindset. There is lots of work out there. And every time something changes in the economy, there's sectors that go up and sectors that go down, right? Like there's healthcare that goes up where they're like, oh my God, we need a ton of content created because we have to help ABC people. And then there's times where it's like, okay, cool. Like the auto industry is like, that's not working for me right now. So don't get stuck in that. There's always work. There's always people who are paying good rates. There's always stuff out there. You may have to like get your truffle pig out to go find it, but it's there. So the other thing is that you don't want to get into this thing that I talked about before is like, oh, it'll only take X time, or like if you do it for, you know, if you do an hour less, will it take less? Will it cost $100 less? So here's the deal. You don't want to have a conversation with someone who comes in and says, oh, I tried to do it on my own and it took me 3 hours. It should only take you an hour because you know how to do this thing. No, no, like you don't, like there's this thing that people think about. And it's this thing with, it's this thing with creating content, because people write all the time. Writing is like, I always talk about this. Writing is like one of the oldest professions. Besides, we already know the oldest profession, but writing is one of the oldest professions. It has survived for bajillions of years, right? Everybody writes now. Text messages, social media posts, comments, emails, they're writing all the time. So they think in their mind that that makes them a good writer, or they're like, oh, because I do this thing all the time and now you're a professional, it should take you less time. It's like, no. It's the same thing as when you bring your car to the mechanic. You're not like, I tried to change the oil and it took me 5 hours, but you're a professional, it should only do this. Like, that's not how it works, right? There's all these different things that happen. So don't get stuck in that conversation like that. Don't factor that into pricing. Don't think about that when it comes to money. You need to think about your own process. And this is why I always talk about per project pricing versus hourly. Hourly is when you get stuck in this idea with clients that are like, okay, well, it's only this many hours. No, we are on value. It does not, nobody cares how much time it takes you to do something. Nobody cares. Because if you go in there and you say, all right, it took me 50 hours to do this and you made $2 million from it, nobody cares. Nobody cares. But if you go in there with a client that's like, oh my God, 50 hours, like they're missing the whole point of that $2 million or however much money your content made them, or sales page, whatever. That's where we want to be. We want to be with clients that are like, I get the value of the content. I get the pricing. I get where this is going. Not that they're like quibbling over hours. That's just insanity time. All right, move along. So if you want to pop it in the chat, or if you just want to think about it, like, let me know in the chat, which of those don'ts do you want to walk away from forever? So this is something important to think about. Which of these don'ts is something that you want to walk away from in your business? And you should write this down, because it should be a focus of like where you're taking your business. So you can put it in the chat or you can write it down. I always kind of encourage writing it down, because when you write things down, it like, it helps you remember them, but also so you have like a list. All right, let's talk about number 2, reliable ways to build that top recurring income. So here we go. Boop. All right, so part 1 here. Part 1 is, do you see, these are things that you have to ask in your client calls. Okay, I ask this all the time. Do you see any other projects in the pipeline you may need help with, or how do we build this relationship? These either go together or they're separate questions. So as you kind of go along, right? Like, do you see any other projects in the pipeline you may need help with? This is critical, critical. This is how you end up making more money, because if you end up having a client where they're like, yes, we have 3 or 4 other projects, we want to make our content do X, Y, Z. We understand that content does this and we want to do that. That helps you get more projects. That helps you upsell. That helps you align with people that are going in the right direction. That's really important. And that goes with building relationships with people. You don't want to build relationships with people that are just kind of like, oh, we just want to do one blog post. We all know one blog post is not going to do anything. That's nut time. What we want to do is align with people that are like, yeah, we're upping our blog posts because we want to do ABC goals. Like, they can tell you that. You're aligning with people that can tell you we're doing blog posts, then we're expanding to this content and this, but you don't know unless you ask. You have to ask this on the call. Before you sign anything, before you talk about anything else, you have to talk about this. So I usually ask this kind of at the end of the call, after we've kind of talked about the initial project. But you have to ask. This is how I upped my retainers. This is how I ended up aligning with clients that were like, yeah, we have 10 different things in the pipeline, or we have, we want to start with this initial project and see how that goes. But then we also want to expand these other things. You want to make sure you're not getting into the hamster loop that I was in when I burned out, which is like one off, over and over again, or they want to do 2 blog posts, or like something that you know is not going to work. And a stat that I think is really important, especially when it comes to that, is there are 100 billion blogs with a B, 100 billion blogs, and there are 2 million podcasts. Okay. So creating 1 blog post or 2 blog posts for 100 billion blogs, trying to get traffic, trying to do that, like we all know that's not time. But if you were to help them, whether they're like, yeah, we understand that blog blog posts do this, but we also have a podcast, or we're also doing more webinars, or we are trying to expand our goals, blah, 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 whatever it is, then you can get on the right train. Those are really important. Building relationships with the right people, understanding that you're trying to ask them about like, hey, we should be a team. Let's see if we can build this relationship. And it's kind of like a ping. Are we on the same level? Are we playing the same sport? Like, what's kind of going on here? The next thing is that retainers are your blank check. So when you're doing a retainer, right? When you're doing this retainer, they can evolve. So I've had retainers that have gone on for years. Okay. These are really important. But the way we get retainers is by asking those questions. The way we get longer term projects and longer term things is we have to ask about it. But those things, those retainers that you secure, they can keep getting renewed for a long time. Like I know people who have worked with clients for like 5 years. I think the most mine was like 2 or 3 years, if I remember, but retainers are a blank check. They can keep going on. So if you structure your pricing where you say, I have a package, it's 4 blog posts a month for 3 months, where we see how things go and we create some content. We'll see if we work well together. We'll see how the content's doing. That can easily get renewed multiple times throughout the year. So retainers can be a blank check for you. 3, you want to make sure that you're aligning with those clients, right? This is kind of what I talked about. You need to ask the right questions. You need to align with clients who have a good work pipeline, who understand that they have goals for the content, who understand your pricing, and who are actually going someplace. That is really important. And you have to ask questions when you first talk to them on a call. You're kind of seeing about their personality, how they think about the content, and aligning with people who actually have like a future vision and can tell you why they're creating the content, how it's going to be created, the ideas they have in mind. That's always really important too. Like more so than making sure you hit the right number is aligning with clients that are on the same vision. Because once you're on the same vision, the number itself doesn't matter, because they're like, you get it. So we'll pay whatever we have to pay to work with you because you're one of the few people who gets it. All right. You also want to challenge yourself. This is why I just started the class with asking you to pump up all your numbers, right? Is because you have to challenge yourself. This is how I've made big revenue jumps and how I've ended up getting better and bigger projects, is that I start challenging myself with different types of work, different types of clients, different niches, different things in my business. So you have to kind of step outside your comfort zone and give yourself a challenge, whether that's, you're like, all right, cool. I know that I've been charging $50 for a blog post. That's way too low. The minimum is now $200. Maybe that's your big jump. Or you've been thinking about doing case studies and you're like, I'm going to offer that as a service and like mention that to each one of my new clients that like, either you do case studies or you can help with that type of stuff. All of those things getting out of your comfort zone really matter to pricing. All right. So put it in the chat or write it down. Which one of those strategies do you struggle with the most? So which one of these strategies do you struggle with the most? That's the one you need to work on to help make more money. I'm telling you, all of these things, if you do all of them, you're going to make more money, like guarantee pretty much. But which one of these things is the most uncomfortable, the biggest one you struggle with? Write that down, because that's the one you need to focus on. All right. So whether you're asking these right potential questions or right questions to your potential clients, or getting those retainers, or challenging yourself, I just want to remind you that it's not that you've failed. It's not that you've made all these mistakes. It's that you just haven't gotten there yet. Okay. So if you haven't hit your income goals, it's just that you haven't gotten there yet. It's just the timeline. It's not that you're like failing at everything. So just remember that. Let's talk about knowing when, how, and who to negotiate with. So when you're kind of going through negotiations, this is totally normal. It's money. People are going to negotiate. Like that's just how it works. But there are different times that we want to talk about that. We don't want to talk to people that are like trying to negotiate us down to like the lowest rate possible. We want to negotiate with people who are like, hey, you're a little bit above where our budget is. Our budget is this. Like, if you didn't ask about their budget on the call and they're like, just send us a proposal, then we want to talk to them. So what you're doing here is you really want to work with that client. So number one is you want to work with that client. It is a publication you want to be in, a startup you want to work for, a Fortune 500 company. It's something that's driving you where you really want to work with that client. You either want that client or that clip, like they're like offering a case study and maybe you do your first case study a little bit below what you normally would because you really want that clip so you can get more case studies. Or you need the work. Now, this is something that happens all the time. There are times where you're just like, man, I really want to be at $1,000 for this project, but I'll take 800 because right now I need the work. Or whatever reason. So when you're in these situations, you're negotiating on price just if it's like a bit lower in terms of their budget, right? So you're like kind of mixing this, it's like a science and also like kind of poking and feeling it out. So for me, it's like I'll negotiate on price if it's like a client I want, a clip I want, or it's basically like I need the money right now for whatever reason. So there's this thing that happens where like you're not negotiating every time. If you're aligning with the right clients, you shouldn't be negotiating all the time. It should be just randomly happening. So the other thing is that you want to talk about who. So the people you're negotiating with should already see either your value as like, I want to work with Mandy, I want to work with that person, or they're like, I see the value in content and I really want to work with someone who also sees the value of content. And you're just kind of like a little bit off on budget. The other thing that you want to do is like clients you really want to work with, like publications that you want to byline in, or a startup or some kind of thing that you really want to work with. And the other thing is that long-term value. So you've talked to a client who's like, yeah, we really want to work with you, but like our budget is a bit less than your proposal. Or, we thought about our budget and we don't have as much money as we thought. But we have, a bunch more projects, to work on. So you can either negotiate with them on like, hey, I'm not going to do a trial project. We could do 2 of these projects so that it's worth your time and value and money. Or it's someone who has a bunch of work in the pipeline that's like actually legitimate work. They're not like, oh, it's write all you can write. It's like, we're just trying to pump out all this content. Like that's usually kind of sticky, but you want to be with someone who has a long-term pipeline, who has long-term value, or you can negotiate some kind of situation where we're close enough on price. Maybe we're like $500-ish off, $200 off, something like that, not $5,000 off. Something that's close enough. And then you want to work with them for a bunch of different reasons, but they're really important one is that they see value in either you, like I saw your clips and I love your work, I want to work with you, or they see value in long-term content. Like they see this goal, like they have goals. They can tell you why this content is important for their audience. They can tell you a lot of stuff that's important to growing the content value and paying money for that content. And then the last one is basically that you want to understand how to negotiate, right? So you have to have those floors. You have to have your price floors per type of writing, and you have to have your project minimums where it's like, I'm not going below this number. And then if you ballpark them high, like, so sometimes what ends up happening is you're like, I want to raise my rate, or I'm thinking that this project is really involved. I'm going to go on the high end of my ballpark. If you really want to work with that client, then you go kind of like your mid ballpark or even your low ballpark sometimes, depending on how things go. But you're not going to this place of fear where what you're negotiating is like, you're scared that like, oh my God, there's not going to be another client if they walk away. There's always another client. There's always another client. So you need to stay within your realms, right? Your lands that you oversee basically. So if you went high, see if that works. If you go kind of mid-range, if you're kind of figuring out, like how their numbers compare to your price floors or compare to your project minimums, like kind of think that over. The negotiating thing is kind of like, for me, is like, when am I going to walk away? Like at what point am I deciding like, okay, this is like the end all be all? You have to know that number. Like if they're saying 500 and you're like, my minimum number is 700, then you might have to walk away and find someone at 700. But there's not this, like, I always try to tell this to writers, is like, we're not sitting at this like real estate table with like our greased up hair and our suits and like, it's not 1985. Like we're not doing that. We're just sitting there saying like, this is what I would like, this is the value of my work, $800, $10,000, whatever. Does that work with your budget? This is why on your potential client calls, you need to ask about their budget, because negotiations usually happen when you send a proposal, when someone's like, I don't know what my budget is, or can you just send a proposal? So if we ask on our potential client call, what's their budget for this work, then you can say like, oh, we're not playing the same sport, like their budget's way off. Or you can be like, okay, cool, we're on the same thing. They don't give you a budget. You often end up in these negotiations, but it should be close enough that you can kind of wiggle room a number, and you should know when you're ready to walk away. Like the strong part about negotiating is you're like, I get it that I'm not fit right now, or that this number is not good for you. I'd love to check back in a few months to see if we can work together. Like you have to know when you're ready to kind of walk away. It should be It shouldn't be this back and forth of like, what about 750 or what about 850 or like, no, like we're close enough to pick a number within 2 emails. So it shouldn't be this crazy thing. All right, let me know in the chat, which negotiation option will help your future business the most? So which one? Is it when, who, or how? So think about that. When, who, or how? Which one will help your business the most? Understanding how to do that or when to do it or who to negotiate with. Write that down. All right, number 4, no more feast and famine, roller coaster, or grinding for every cent. So let's talk about this. So feast and famine happens because of number 1, you're not filling your marketing pipeline, and marketing doesn't have to be gross. Marketing is basically like, and I always think about it this way, is do you need help with your content? I can help you with that. Have a great day. That's the end of that. There's no more like weird shit that we have to do. Okay. Oh, sorry, I cursed. But you always have to be filling that marketing pipeline. This is why I give out templates. This is why I have like a template pack, is because I kept getting asked like how I do my marketing. It's like, I'm not doing it sleazily. I'm not doing it gross. I'm just making a list of people that make sense, finding, using the revenue ranges. So you need at least 5 to 50 million for a regular company in revenue. They need to have 5 to 50 million in revenue. And it depends on niche. Some companies have a big marketing budget with 5 million in revenue. And some companies, like some types of niches, they need 40, 50 million before they start pumping a lot into marketing. And we're in the marketing department as content writers. The other one is startups. I work with startups a lot. They need at least 3 to 10 million. 3 million is your minimum for startups before they start pumping it into marketing. And sometimes, like most of the time, you're looking for like Series A, Series B at a minimum in startups. But you need to make a list and you need to do your marketing and you templatize it, right? So that's like making it really simple and easy. And all you're doing, and I call it drive-through, right? Drive-through LOIs, letters of introduction, LOI. You're just like, hey, hope you're having a great day. Do you need any help with content? I'm qualified. I am a freelance real estate content strategist and content marketing writer. I've written for these clients. Here's a link to my portfolio. Would love to chat with you more. Bye. Have a great day. That's it. Like, we're not making it ultra complicated, but we're like shoveling the coal. You have to shovel the coal or the train's not going to run. You have to do that all the time. This is how writers get into feast and famine, is they look too short in the pipeline. They're like, oh, I have work for the next 2 weeks. Nope. You need work for the next 3 months. So if you don't have work, you got to start shoveling that coal, and you should be shoveling the coal all the time. My marketing has changed over the course of my business. So like I marketed for an hour every single day, Monday through Friday. And that hour can be sending LOIs and pitches. It can be following up. It can be connecting with people on LinkedIn. It can be liking and commenting on people's stuff, but it has to be a combination. It has to be happening all the time. But like, so I did that every day for an hour. The number I give is 50 to 75 LOIs a month. And then after you have a bunch of work, you can kind of ease off. So now I do my marketing quarterly. Like the first month of every quarter, I send 50-ish LOIs. And that keeps the pipeline going, but you have to fill the pipeline. Even me, I fill the pipeline all the time. Number 2 is that you need to sign clients who see value in your content and your work. So this was something we've talked about before. In order to make more money, you have to sign up with people who get it. They're like on the tuning fork. They get the idea of content, why it's important, the value in it, how to move it forward, how, like, what their goals are. That's really important because they give you long-term work and they pay you well. Like, they understand why you charge what you charge. The third thing is, the number 2 way I get work is my freelance friends. Like, number 1 is LinkedIn, right? Sending those LOIs. But number 2 is that I have a bunch of freelance friends who like get my business. They know what I'm looking for. They know the types of clients. And these aren't referrals where they're like, Mandy, meet Gerald. These are like, they just see an article and they send it to me and they're like, hey, this might, you might want to send them an LOI, or you might want to know about this trend or whatever. That's really important to not only making more money, but having people who understand your business. Like the referrals, it's like another pair of eyes. And if you have like 10 friends looking out for your business all the time, it's a lot easier to get work. It's a lot easier to make money and avoid feast and famine. The last one is you need to always be learning and researching. Like, you need to learn more about your clients, learn more about writing good content, learn more about the audiences you write for. Learn more about how to price your work better. You need to research different prices. You need to talk to more people. That's really important. The reason why like a lot of people end up really liking my pricing guide is because I update it all the time. Like I just did a big update where I added a ton of different content strategy projects in there. And I think that that's like, we have to keep researching that and knowing like what's available to us as writers. What are the types of things that we can do? And that kind of stuff helps you make more money, but it also gets you away from feast and famine and all these other issues that just really tank your income as a writer. All right, so put it in the chat or write this down. What's one pricing step that you're going to take today, right now, like when we get off this class, to help you earn more? So write that down. All right, 5, this is our last little bit. So alignment with high quality and high paying clients. So what we're doing here is we're looking for teamwork. When you get on a call with someone, they are like, we are collaborating on content. You are not an employee. We understand you have other clients. We want to work with you. You don't work for us. Like, you are looking for an atmosphere where you are a partner with them. That's what high quality clients look for. That's like where they're at. A lot of times people mistake this as like the red light clients. They're like, oh, I'm writing all this stuff. Like, no, your green light clients are the ones who understand that this is a partnership, that you have a business, that you run other things, that you are providing value to them in terms of content. And it is like, they're not like, if you mess up, I'm going to fire you. It's like this teamwork thing where they understand like, yeah, there's going to be some back and forth. We're trying to figure it out. We're going to figure out the content. Like, it's going to take a little bit of onboarding. You're looking for a teamwork atmosphere. Those are the people who pay you well. Those are the people who understand the editing process, the writing process. They understand what content does when it's published. That's really important. 2, they have a budget and it matches your rates. So we talked about this. You're playing the same sport. When you ask them what's their budget, they have a budget. Like, they're saying, yeah, we're paying $800 per blog for, an 800 to 1,000 word blog post or whatever. Or they say like, oh, well, we don't have a budget like per blog post, but we'd like to spend, less than $5,000 on 3 months of content. And you're like, oh, that's not quite right for me. Like, there's a number they can give you on the call, or there's some kind of way where you can figure out you're playing the same sport. Now, sometimes great clients don't have a budget. They're not like, they're not always kind of like figuring it out. But when you send a proposal or when you give them a ballpark number, they're like, yeah, that makes sense. Like that makes sense to me. Let's do this. So there's a lot of times where if you get verbal confirmation on a call, or you get some kind of thing where they're like, yeah, we want to work with you. Like, they're jazzed about working with you. They get the value of the content. That's really important. But you need to play the same sport. Otherwise you end up with this like gear slippage situation the whole time. It's really unfortunate. All right. You also need to make sure that you price your writing projects at a level that makes you feel a bit nervous, right? This is your reminder. So if I were going to take a project, right, and I'm like, okay, cool. I've been charging 80 cents a word or whatever. I'm going to try $1 a word. Oh my gosh, that makes me feel, ooh, I'm a little uneasy. That's where you should be. That's where you should be, because most of the time, like I said, writers are undercharging. Even me, I've lost money from undercharging. And so you need to pick a number that makes you feel a little bit nervous. That's where you should be. That's pushing you out of your comfort zone. That's picking a number that is probably where you like your value is actually at. But it's something that, over time, it just keeps pushing you to really charge for what your work is worth. It's pushing you into a place that a lot of writers like fear charging more money, but they don't understand how much value they've gained in a short period of time. Like, it's a lot different than a staff job where you like ride the same ride every day. You're just on the thing. When you're a freelancer, you get to work with a ton of different projects, a ton of different types of clients, a ton of different types of content. That is really, really valuable. And the more clients you work with in a certain niche, or the more types of case studies you do, you gain a lot of value and experience from that. And that costs more money, right? That means your work is of higher value to someone because it does more work, right? So you have to pick a price. And this is important for high quality clients. It's like, most of the time when you meet a high quality client, like, you're charging and they're like, yep, that makes sense. Like, I've talked to people so many times and they're like, yep, that makes sense. That's how you know, like, that you're kind of in the right ballpark there. All right. So this is what we talked about. We talked about pricing do's and don'ts. We talked about reliable ways to build top recurring income. We talked about knowing when, how, and who to negotiate with if they're kind of giving you a lower price. and you're kind of figuring out like, do I really want to take this? We talked about getting rid of the feast and famine roller coaster and no more grinding for every cent. And then we talked about aligning with those high quality, high paying clients. So I think the next thing is, okay, last thing is, let me know in the chat, which I will open, what is the number one most helpful thing that you learned today? So I'm going to pop that because it's been kind of, it's hard sometimes for me to teach and do the chat. So we had a bunch of twos. Okay, cool. And then partial one, love the dogs. Thank you. Yeah, I think when you're on those calls, like, yeah, if you haven't gained anything, you're not losing anything. Yeah, you're missing out on red flags. I think that's really good. Yeah, yeah, cavemen definitely wrote, right? There's cave paintings, which are stories, telling stories. Okay. Yeah, so I'm just gonna pop, this says, can you please clarify what an LOI is? It's a letter of introduction, LOI. And it's just like this, basically for me, I've templatized them. So I have like 20 of them for all different niches and combination of niches. So I have one for real estate and one for real estate and prop tech and one for real estate and travel, or I have a bunch, but they're basically just these, there's just like, hey, basically, like I said, right? Like, hey, I hope you're having a great day. Could you use help with your content at blah, blah, blah company? I'm an Austin-based freelance real estate content strategist, whatever your niche is or whatever relates to them. And then you write down clients that you've worked or, you know, clients, my clients include these people. If you don't have any clients, all you have to do is explain like how you could help them or previous experience or, you know, stuff that makes sense to them in their niche and industry. And then you're like, here's a link to my website, or here's a link to wherever your portfolio is. And then you say like, love to chat more. And then you leave and go about your day. Yeah. Letters of introduction. So, okay, cool. All right. I think that's kind of it. Yeah. So now questions. So if you guys have any more questions, you can put them in the chat. I'm going to stop screen share. So I hope that was helpful. I know I kind of went through a lot, but I know that you guys are also going to get this on the recording. So you're going to be able to go back and listen to it and be like, you know, so if you have a question, just, you can pop it in chat or, you know, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks so much for this. It's been a bit of a drinking from a fire hose, which is awesome. I love these fast moving sessions. I do have a question for you. I've spent a lot of time in my career managing sales oriented professionals, and you referred to this a lot in your process, which is the fear factor, I'll call it, not to turn a phrase, but fear of losing something, or scarcity mindset is something that comes up. What I used to mention to people who would come to me and say, hey, Phil, I've got this deal I'm working, but I'm afraid of losing it if I change my pricing, or it could be anything, right? Like it could be a contract issue, something like that. We're afraid we're going to lose it. What I would say to them is, lose what? We don't have we don't have the deal yet.
Yeah.
Right? We're not losing anything, right? Like, so how do you think that impacts? That's easy to say when someone's working in a broad pipeline, right? They have this rich pipeline full of deals. You're not losing anything. Get on to your next deal or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
That's hard to do, and a lot of folks in our group are either newer to freelancing or kind of in that spot where, geez, I kind of want this deal, right?
Yeah.
So it's a balancing act. Can you go into a little bit about not undermining your own value a little bit, and kind of how that scarcity mindset might influence that process?
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is important to understand is like, there's going to be times where you're going to take work for the money. Like there's that. So the scarcity thing, a lot of times people is like, they're afraid that they're going to lose money, right? Even if they haven't secured the project. So that's one, like you're going to take projects for the money when you're starting out. You just are. The second thing is that there's a lot of times where we think about it as like, they're just not your client. Like I've told myself this many times. But no matter what you do, someone like is just sometimes not your client. Like you could have done everything perfectly and they sound like a perfect fit, and then they just ghost you. They just never talk to you again. So for me, it's more aligning with this value of yourself. That's why I like talking about, like thinking about the value of your pricing, the value of your work, because no matter what anybody else does, that's external. Like okay, like whatever you do, whether you choose me or not, that's external. But whether you kind of choose yourself with value pricing and you're like, I feel confident in these numbers, I feel confident doing this, that makes you feel way better. Like there's nothing that can really break that. To me, like when you get chosen by a client, or like you end up working together, right? They sign the contract. There's nothing better than someone signing a contract at a number you feel good about, where you feel like you've been true to yourself. They're signing for like true Mandy at true Mandy pricing, whatever. So if you try to like back down and you're like, oh my God, like, oh my gosh, I didn't do this thing. Like it's either going to work or it's not. Like that's happened to me so many times where like I've worried about, oh my gosh, I should have done $50 less or $100 less. Like that's, why are we quibbling over that? It's either gonna, like, the difference between that is so small. Someone signing, if you're trying to quibble over $50, that's not your client. Now, $5,000 of difference, or $1,000, that's a big deal. But when I was starting out, that's what I worried about, was like, someone's going to say no because of 50 extra bucks. That's how small your mindset is. That's like $50. Like, seriously, no, like, no, this is something I get really like worked up about, because I used to fight this when I was starting. It's like, this is why we market, is like, you market so that you have a ton of options. When you have a ton of options, you can be like, yeah, dude, not going to work out. Bye. But if you're not marketing and you're not really getting yourself out there and you're not like figuring, making friends and figuring it out, what ends up happening is like, you're like, my options are so slim, let's quibble over $50. Like, no. You should be in a position where you're constantly putting things out there. Like, you're sending those LOIs, you're sending pitches, you're watching for companies that make sense for you, you're figuring out your niches. Either you're like sometimes writing for trade magazines to get more niche clients, or you're writing for publications. But this scarcity thing is like, I used to dive in that pool every day when I started out. And I can just tell you, like, it's either going to work or it's not. Even when you're starting out, there's not, like, no matter if you do things perfectly or whatever, it's just, there's just times it's not going to work, no matter if it, and it has nothing to do with price. And this is something that people talk about a lot, where when you're talking about courses, or you're talking about content, or different types of like value-based stuff, like, it's most like, there's some crazy stat where it's like 90% of the time, like, price isn't the problem. Price isn't, it's not the thing. It's that they don't need it right now, or that they don't understand the value of it. They don't get the long-term thing. When they were talking to you, like, you guys just didn't click, like, there's a bunch of things that are like non-price based that affect it. So did that answer your question? Okay. Yeah. So basically, like, that's what you want to think about. Either it's going to work or it's not. You have to feel good on the inside about what you're doing, because signing those clients where it's like, you feel good about it, like, and you need to market a bunch and have things in the pipeline. Like, you're going to be marketing for quite some time, like, before you actually have a bunch of clients. But it's something where it's like, you have to remember that those irons, you're putting irons in the fire, and eventually one of those irons is going to work out. But you have to keep putting them in there, because you never know when they're going to work out. So if you keep doing that, you're going to end up with a bunch of options, and then you can choose what you do and don't want to work on. And then price is like the last thing. Like, you have so many options. You're like, okay, I'm charging $1 a word. And then they're like, we can't afford that. And you're like, okay, I know the value of my work. Bye. I have other irons, like that kind of thing.
Thank you. Appreciate the explanation.
Yeah. Let's see. So I think you can ask something too. Yeah.
Hey, I don't know if you are talking about me and everything, but yes, I
Yeah,
didn't want
go
to be, yeah, Mandy. So actually, it is more of, a collaborative request. So as I don't know if we have interacted before and everything, but so I run Eclist. It's a digital-based brand strategy agency, and we always love to work with copywriters and creators who actually understand the impact they're creating. And I focus largely about branding and expressing one's personality. And we like to make sure that every aspect and everything that we create, not just, a tagline and everything, but even if it's a video, it expresses one's personality, and that is conveyed to the end users, because I'm a human-centric strategist and I try to build these human relationships. And it looks like you're someone who can really do that. So I'd love to know if, not tomorrow mainly because I'm a bit down today, but maybe if you're interested in connecting and talking about some sort of collaboration we can do for my agency.
Yeah, you could send me an email, or you can go on the little Slack thing. You can always send me a DM on Slack because
Sure.
you're on Slack, right? Yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's
I'm
probably
Slack,
easier.
yeah.
But you can always send me an email. It's just mandy@mandyellis.com. But yeah, feel free.
Great. I'll send over a scheduling link so we can just get started, right?
Cool. That sounds good.
Yeah. Wonderful session, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I don't see any more questions. So yeah, if anybody ever has questions, you can just DM me in Slack, or you can like send me an email. I'm totally cool with that. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you're feeling more confident about raising your rates. I'm hoping that like everybody's kind of getting this idea that like one of my, like the last thing I'm going to say is this thing that, so here's the deal. A long time ago, if I remember right, it was like 1846 or 1870. I think it was 46. So back in 1846, and if you read Jeff Goins's book, Real Artists Don't Starve, it's in there. So he talks about Jeff Merger, but he's French, so it's probably Merger. But anyways, this guy invented this whole idea of the starving artist, okay, in 1846. That's when it got invented, or whenever it was in the 1800s. So this guy invented this idea. He made like the plays, but this dude, right? So he invented this idea of the starving artist, and he ended up dying broke, penniless. I think he was homeless too, but he had nothing. So he invented this idea, and somehow along the way, we have just continued adopting that for the last 150, 60, 70 years. So like for the last 150 plus years, we've adopted this idea of the starving artist. It's not a thing, okay? Go read that book by Jeff Goins, Real Artists Don't Starve, and they'll talk about Michelangelo and all these people who are basically like lawn gnomes who got paid to like live on people's lands and like do art. So they made millions of dollars. They were super, super rich. Okay. So the idea of a starving artist was just by this dude who had a really small mindset. And it's just, we've just absorbed that for almost no reason. But there are lots of people that you look at throughout history, writers, painters, art people, creatives, who have made huge piles of money, okay? That has to do with value and understanding their work. And other people, like I said, they're like little lawn gnomes. They give them like a little house and they live in there and they take tours. This is what they did. They would like have people come and be like, oh, over there's Michelangelo and over there's, so-and-so. And like they'd have, it's like a thing, like a petting zoo. So, but they made huge piles of money, right? They made huge piles of money. But nobody remembers that because this one dude, Henry Merger, in 1846 or 47, whatever, decided that we've all grabbed onto this like bohemian, blah, blah, blah crap. It's not a thing, okay? It's not a thing. People who make money, like there are lots of people, lots of writers who make six figures. There are lots of writers who make 7 or 8 figures, like writing sales stuff or running other things in their business. But I'm hoping that you don't forget this idea. Like that's not a thing. It's a made up idea by someone who died a long time ago who was broke as fuck. So don't do that. Okay. Don't do that. Okay. That's all I have. That's the last thing I have to say. Sorry I had to curse, but like it's serious. I take it seriously.
Serious.
Yeah, I agree with that, Mandy. That's an incredibly great point at the end there. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah.
And Chris, anything else to add? Are we ready to wrap up?
We're ready. I think I just want to say thank you so much, Mandy.
Yeah.
It was really invigorating to hear you speak so honestly and candidly, especially about like determining and seeing your own value in the work that you get, because I definitely know I have a lot of friends who are artists and creatives in the sense of like visual art, and they lowball themselves all the time, and it's hard to say, hey, you put a little bit of yourself in this, it deserves more. It's going to continue to bring people through the door. It's going to continue to be a conversation piece. It's going to continue to bring value, whether it's to somebody's home or to their professional life. And I think you articulated it really well, where you said, listen, if you want to put it in numbers, you certainly can, right? If you want to say that this is $30,000, this is your content strategy, that stayed the same for 5 years, that means technically you put it all together, but you only got $6,000 each year. And they raked in however much money they got from that, right?
Yeah.
And I think it really puts a lot of things in perspective. And I also loved how considerate you were when it came to negotiating, right? Because you've got so many people have so many different aspects. It's not
Mhm.
sometimes it is like, I've got a financial need, I gotta meet it, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, I really want to be a part of this industry. This is the first step through the door. I'm willing to do what it takes, right? But
Yep.
always have a limit. Always have a line in the sand that you will not cross. And really just so valuable. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
Bye. Thanks, everybody.
Wow.